Welcome back, everyone, to Open Line. We're looking at Tennessee's critical role in giving women the right to vote. Happened 100 years ago. Today is the 100th anniversary of that vote that gave women the right to vote. Tennessee, the state that pushed the nation over the top and allowed women to vote. And we're talking with Miranda Fraley Rhodes. She's curator of Ratified. It's an exhibit there at the Tennessee State Museum. And I wanted to ask, all right, was this, when you look at Tennessee and the battle that took place here, and it was a battle, was Nashville kind of, today, again, you'll see maybe Nashville thinks one way, other parts of the state think differently. I mean, was this just a Nashville thing where they wanted women to have the right to vote and maybe more rural areas were opposed, or did you see lots of support from all across the state? You know, how did that dynamic play out?
Well, that's a great question. And really, this had to be a statewide movement for it to be successful. Because if you think about the ratification battle in the Tennessee General Assembly, it was going to take legislators from all over the state for ratification to pass. And it's been so exciting to learn more about suffragists all throughout the state. That's really been one of the focuses of our exhibit. And we also have an online feature related to this as well. So we tried to find a story related to women's political activities for every county in the state. And it was so fun to find out what women were doing in local communities. One of my favorite examples is the Fayetteville Equal Suffrage League. So they were very energetic, but they did not have a lot of money. And they entered a decorated automobile in the Fayetteville 4th of July parade and won a $50 prize. And the suffragists there used that $50 to pay their dues to the State Suffrage Association so they could participate in that. And they were also planning for their own suffrage banners. Suffrage banners were really important to suffragists. They thought the beauty of their banners was one way to express really the ideals of their cause. We have two Tennessee suffrage banners on display in the exhibit that were conserved just for this purpose. And we're so excited to get to share those. But by 1919, there were over 70 local suffrage leagues all throughout the state. And that really underestimates the number of women in Tennessee engaged in the movement, because suffrage leagues in this time of segregation, they tended to be organizations of white women. But African American women were advocating for suffrage within their own organizations and were very active. So if you look at sort of the whole picture, there were women's groups all over the state really embracing women from many different backgrounds, many different perspectives, and those groups were all advocating for votes for women.
Fascinating. That's very interesting how that manifested itself. And all right, let's go through some names of prominent people. Ann Dallas Dudley. She was here in Nashville. What was her role? I've certainly heard her name. So what was her role?
She was a very prominent locally. She was a president of the National Equal Suffrage League. She later served as a State Suffrage Association president, and she was a national officer in the National American Woman Suffrage Association. So she was a very prominent suffragist. And one of the important things that she did was really to contest negative stereotypes about suffragists, which that basically they were unfeminine, they were anti-family, and she would often appear with her two lovely children. And So really emphasize that suffragists were just sort of normal people and not to believe those stereotypes. And she was very effective at that.
Fascinating. So that was one of the arguments. I guess I started the show out with that. Save the South. A woman's place is in the home. But the argument was it's anti where women should be. And so she tried to counter that movement. What did we see? What role did churches play, if at all? Were churches on one side or the other? Did they support this? Did they not?
It really varied. But churches of themselves were such important institutions for women and women's community engagement. Many women in Tennessee joined the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and that was so important. The national WCTU endorsed women's suffrage, and that really helped to make the cause of suffrage respectable for women who did not consider themselves to be socially radical. And women were very engaged in church work and oftentimes advocating for things they saw as positive change within their communities, like temperance. That led them to politics. So just being able to organize into groups and work together and kind of see what was it going to really take to get a reform they wanted accomplished, that was a great contribution to the movement.
Interesting. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back, talk a little more about this. Take a break, be back right after this.